Hello everybody, it's your friendly fishmonger Dan from dansfish.com, and today I'm going to talk about a cute little goby. They're a ton of fun, they're awesome. It's the white-cheeked goby. The scientific name is Rhinogobius duospilus. It used to be Rhinogobius wui, which is way more fun, W-U-I, but it got reclassified to duospilus. So that's the goby we're going to talk about. Now, I'm pretty sure that's the species that I have here, but there are a lot of Rhinogobius species, and a lot of them look very similar, and I'm not a taxonomist, so I'm not quite sure for certain that that's the species, but that's the one that supposedly we usually get in the pet trade. They come out of China and Vietnam, and they come from a more temperate climate. It's less tropical where they come from, so they don't mind the temperatures cooler. In fact, they don't like the temperatures very warm. Once you get up to about 80 degrees or so, they can maybe get a little bit uncomfortable. They need high oxygen content in the water. They come from really fast-flowing rivers. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let me show you the fish, because that's what we're here for, and I'll talk about them while you're looking at the fish, because they're a lot cuter than I am. All right, here they are, the white-cheeked gobies. One of my favorite fish. They're always clowning around. They have interesting behavior. They're just really fun to watch. I can watch them for hours. A lot of fish that we have are beautiful, and they swim back and forth in the tank, and that's very calming. But I think adding a fish like this adds an element of personality, an element of interesting behavior that when I get tired of just watching pretty fish swim back and forth, I can get closer to the tank and watch these guys and focus in on behavior. And they don't have a lot of really bright, gaudy colors, but they get these interesting patterns on them and these interesting color combinations. Males will get these bright white cheeks and bright white throat areas, and on those are these red veins, like these bright red stripes that accentuate that. And when they are wanting to, they'll flare that throat out really big, and those bright red stripes will just pop out. And that's how they tell a female, hey, I'm a stud, come over here, this is my little spawning cave. Or how they tell a rival male, hey, get out of my territory, this is mine. So they use it for dominance behavior, they use it for display. See, there he goes. They use it for territory behavior and for spawning behavior. So really interesting fish, I think. Now, these guys, as I mentioned, they come from areas that are subtropical. They like it a little cooler, and that's important to keep in mind when you set up their aquarium. They'll do fine in an unheated aquarium in a house, and they don't like it real hot. One thing about keeping these guys is if you do put them in an aquarium with other fish, something to keep in mind is they aren't super fast to the food. So if you put them in with a big group of tetras or barbs or something, they could get out-competed with the food. So I would put them in with either something that's a little slower moving or a type of fish that generally stays at the top, like an Aplochilus killifish or something like that, so that they don't get out-competed. Because if you put them in with really fast fish, then they won't get to the food in time. And speaking of food, something to be aware of is these guys don't eat flake food, they don't eat pellet food, at least I've never gotten them to. They like frozen food. I have no problem feeding them, say, frozen brine shrimp, frozen bloodworms, and their favorite is frozen mysis. I use the small freshwater Canadian mysis shrimp. I think it's PE mysis is the brand I'm using, and they like those a lot. They'll also eat live food, obviously live blackworms that are in the tank right now, and also baby brine shrimp I give them sometimes too. So a nice mix of live and frozen foods is a requirement for these guys. So don't get them unless you have the ability and the willingness to do that. So live food, cooler temperatures. Now, getting a group of these guys is fine. They display a lot. They don't really harm each other. They do spar and stuff, but I don't see them harm each other as long as there's a big enough tank that they can get away from each other, and a lot of little pipes in there, or rock work, or some kind of thing to block up lines of sight would help if you had more than one male in a tank. If you keep them in a tiny tank together, more than one male in a tiny tank, and there's nowhere for the subdominant males to get away, then you could have some problems. But I've always kept them in tanks big enough for them to get away from each other, with pipes and other stuff in there that they can hang out in and go into and get away from each other. And I've never had even a torn fin that I've noticed. So they're peaceful. They're fine with each other. Just make sure that you give them a chance to get away, so you don't have a problem. They're tons of fun when their fins all erect and they're all spreading their cheeks out. They're awesome. So these guys have fused pelvic fins, so they can use it as like a suction cup, and they'll suck on the glass and stick there. They'll stick on rocks and things like that. And that's an adaptation for these kind of swift-flowing rivers they come from. So they can stick onto the rocks so they don't get swept away by the current. Now, that's important to keep in mind when you have this fish, because fish that come from flowing current need a couple things. They generally don't like the temperatures high, because in a fast-flowing current there's a lot of evaporation, and that cools the water. So they don't like high temperatures in general. I'm speaking broadly. And they also need a high dissolved oxygen content. Swiftly flowing streams and rivers and things, there's a lot of churn, and so they dissolve a lot of oxygen. So what that means is you can't have a whole lot of organic waste in the water. I don't have a power head in this tank or anything like that. I just have my standard sponge filter and a box filter. They're both air driven. And there's not any more flow in this tank than in my other aquariums. But I do keep the water really clean. If you get organic wastes in there and bacterial blooms and things like that, then those will absorb a lot of oxygen, and then there won't be enough oxygen available for the fish. So keep the water clean. And by clean, I mean chemically clean and not full of waste. That's what I mean. I have particulates floating around in all my tanks, so I'm not saying it has to be crystal clear. I'm just saying not a lot of decomposing waste or chemicals. Flowing streams also have very little in the way of, say, ammonia or nitrite or even nitrate. So keeping a well-established tank would do well for these guys. So breeding, how these guys breed is the male will typically excavate a small cave or crevice out under a rock, and then he'll go display to the females and hopefully lure her into the cave, and she'll lay her eggs, and then the male will guard them until they hatch. Now, once they hatch and are free swimming, then they'll be preyed upon. So to breed these guys, I've had them breed, but I've never removed the eggs and raised the fry. But they'll breed in these tubes, little PVC tubes, without any problem. And then you can remove those to a rearing tank if you want. Or if you only had a couple in a tank, you could remove all the fish besides the male and hatch them and raise them that way. When they hatch, from other people that have done it, I know that the babies are big enough to eat baby brine shrimp right off the bat, and microworms, things like that. So the babies reportedly are actually fairly simple to raise. So I hope to get that done in the near future. But something fascinating about these guys is, gobies came in from the ocean, and a lot of freshwater goby species, they spawn in the freshwater in the rivers, but then those eggs and larvae are washed down to the ocean, and they develop in salt water until they're adults, and then they return to freshwater to breed, kind of like salmon, right? These are a landlocked species, so these are locked in freshwater. So they spawn and live in rivers, and the babies can be washed down to lakes where they grow and develop until they're big enough to swim back up the river. But they don't need salt water or brackish water. Oh man, that PVC is shining bright right there. Sorry about that. That'll get fixed in just a moment. Yeah. So they don't need salt water or brackish water to breed like a lot of goby species. So you can breed these entirely in fresh water, which is really cool. It makes it a lot easier. Let's see here, what else about these guys? One thing about the Duospilus complex is there's at least 8 species in that. They all look very similar, so you can never quite be sure what you have. Calling them white-cheeked gobies might be the best way to go, because these could be Duospilus, or they could be one of the at least 7 other species, and there's more species being described all the time. So just keep that in mind, unless it's like a taxonomist or ichthyologist telling you exactly what you have. You're probably not going to know which species you have. But it doesn't really matter. They're all really cool. Now, something else is size. These guys don't get much bigger than 2 inches. That's about the max. There are other Rhinogobius species that get bigger. I have a friend in Los Angeles. His name's Stan Sung. I was at his house when I saw my first Rhinogobius several years ago, and he had them in a large tank. I think it was 125 gallon, 120 gallon, something like that, 200 gallon, I don't know. He has big tanks. They're awesome. And it was a different species of Rhinogobius. I don't know which one it was. It might have been, I think it's Zua or something, the one that starts with a Z. It's really pretty, but I'm not sure exactly what it was. But that sucker was at least 3 inches. It was big, and it was gorgeous. But the white-cheeked gobies, the ones I have for sale, are, they're going to max out at about 2 inches. So keep that in mind when you're pairing them with tank mates. Anyways, I think they're, again, endless fun. Just really interesting behavior. They're always displaying with each other. They're always checking each other out. They're always kind of testing the boundaries of each other's territories and flaring and clinging to stuff. They'll cling to the sides of the aquarium and all that. So I love this fish, and if you've never tried them, if you can get a hold of some, give them a crack. They're worth it. Well, I hope you liked that species profile on the white-cheeked goby, Rhinogobius duospilus. One of my favorite gobies. I've kept them a long time. I have yet to raise fry from them. That's something that's on my list to do. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to get them spawning and raise some babies. I haven't done it yet. I've got them spawning, but I've never raised babies before because I've never taken the time to kind of separate them and hatch the eggs and do all that. But I hope to do that this time around. Anyway, they're a great little goby. You can find them at dansfish.com. If you have questions about them or about anything fishy related, please leave a comment down below. I'm happy to answer the questions. I like a nice discussion, and I like talking with you guys. So anyway, until next time, I'll see ya.